There's a version of getting older that nobody warns you about. It doesn't start with a diagnosis. It doesn't start with a bad test result. It starts quietly, with small moments. Walking into a room and forgetting why you went there. Losing a word mid-sentence that you've known your whole life. Feeling a little foggier than you used to, a little slower to connect the dots than you remember being. Most people chalk it up to age, inevitable, just the way things go. But here's what the research keeps showing and what most people are never told. A lot of that mental decline isn't inevitable at all. It's driven by habits, daily habits, things you're probably doing right now, today, without any idea what they're quietly doing to your brain. We're going through 7 of them, and I want you to stay with me all the way through, because number 4 is one that almost everyone over 50 is doing, and it's the one most doctors never think to mention. And toward the end, I'll tell you about one thing that almost everyone does during the day that quietly makes every single habit on this list harder to sustain. It's not another food, not another exercise, and most people never connect it to their brain health at all. Let's start with something you probably did this morning without thinking twice. Most people over 50 move through their day mildly dehydrated. Not dangerously so, not in a way you'd notice on any given day, just quietly, consistently running low on water, day after day, week after week, year after year. And the brain feels it more than any other organ in the body. Here's what most people don't realize. Even a small drop in hydration, as little as 1 or 2% below optimal, causes the brain to physically pull back slightly from the walls of the skull. Focus gets harder, recall gets slower. The mental fog that so many people over 50 describe as just getting older, a significant part of that is simply not drinking enough water. After 50, your sense of thirst also becomes less reliable than it used to be, which means you can be running low and not feel it the way you once did. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. A glass of water first thing in the morning, before coffee, before anything else. Another one mid-afternoon when the brain typically dips. Keep it nearby, make it automatic. Small habit, real impact. But here's where it gets interesting, because number 2 isn't about what you're putting in your body. It's about something you're putting in your ears. Think about how much of your day happens in noise. The television running in the background, even when nobody's really watching it. Music while you cook, a podcast on your walk, radio in the car. Most of it comfortable, familiar, reassuring noise. But chronic background noise, the constant low-level kind, keeps the brain in a state of low alert that never fully switches off. And the brain genuinely needs to switch off. Quiet is when the brain consolidates memory, when it takes the information from the day and moves it into longer-term storage. Quiet is when it processes emotion and restores the mental clarity that accumulating noise slowly erodes. After 50, that restoration process becomes more critical, not less. You don't have to sit in silence for hours, even 15 minutes a day, a quiet morning coffee with no screen in front of you, a short walk without anything in your ears, gives the brain the space it actually needs to function at its best. And what comes next on this list is something that might feel completely unrelated to brain health, but the connection is one of the most powerful ones we know of. The friendships that were easy to maintain at 40 get harder at 55. Life gets quieter, routines get smaller, kids are grown and gone, work schedules change. The social structures that used to create connection naturally start to fall away. And for a lot of people, that gradual withdrawal happens so slowly that it doesn't even feel like a choice. It just becomes the new normal. But here's what's actually happening in the brain during that withdrawal. The regions that handle connection, conversation, reading other people's emotions, navigating the complexity of relationships, are some of the most demanding and intricate systems in the entire brain. When they go unused, they don't just rest. Over time, they start to shrink. Loneliness and social isolation are now among the strongest known risk factors for cognitive decline, stronger, in fact, than many of the things we tend to worry about far more. One real conversation a day makes a measurable difference. A phone call, a regular meetup, something that requires your brain to actually engage with another person. It sounds simple because it is, but the impact on your brain over time is profound.
Stay with me now because number 4 is the one I really want you to hear. This is the one most people are getting wrong every single night. Sleep after 50 changes. It becomes lighter, more interrupted, easier to dismiss as just one of those things you adapt to. And so millions of people quietly accept 5 or 6 broken hours as their new normal and move forward with their day. But while you sleep, your brain does something that nothing else can replace. It runs a deep cleaning cycle, flushing out the metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. That waste that, when it's allowed to build up over time, is directly linked to memory loss and cognitive decline. Cut that process short, night after night, year after year, and the damage is real, and it compounds. This isn't about spending more hours lying in bed, it's about protecting the quality of the sleep you actually get. A consistent wake time every morning, even on weekends, that single habit does more for sleep quality than almost anything else. A bedroom that's cool and genuinely dark. No screens in the last 30 minutes before sleep. These aren't small adjustments. They may be the single most important investment you can make in how your brain ages. And the next habit on this list makes everything worse, including your sleep, while quietly doing its own separate damage on top. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. How often do you reach for something sweet during the day? Mid-morning when energy dips, mid-afternoon to get through the next hour, something small after dinner out of pure habit. For most people over 50, it happens without much thought. A biscuit, a bit of chocolate, something to smooth over a low point in the day. But consistent daily sugar, the kind that's become invisible background habit, drives inflammation throughout the body, and the brain is exquisitely sensitive to that inflammation. Over time, it narrows the tiny blood vessels that supply the brain, it disrupts the communication between brain cells, and it quietly accelerates the shrinking of the hippocampus, the memory center, which is the part of the brain you rely on most and the part most vulnerable to the effects of aging. The goal here isn't perfection, and it isn't deprivation. It's awareness, noticing the habit, replacing it more often than not with something that genuinely nourishes, a piece of fruit, a small handful of nuts, something with real substance. Your brain will feel the difference faster than you might expect. Now number 6, and this one surprises people because it has nothing to do with what you eat or how you sleep. The human body was never designed to be still for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, but for most people over 50, that's simply what life looks like. A chair at breakfast, a desk or a sofa for most of the day, a car between places, and every hour of extended stillness is an hour the brain goes without something it genuinely depends on: blood flow, oxygen, and the remarkable cascade of brain-supporting chemicals that physical movement triggers. Movement releases compounds that protect existing brain cells and actually stimulate the growth of new ones, something we once thought wasn't possible in adulthood at all. You don't have to join a gym. You don't have to run. A 30-minute walk most days is enough to measurably change what's happening inside your brain. If even that feels like too much right now, just standing up and moving around for a few minutes every hour is a meaningful start. The brain responds to movement quickly, often within days. Small, consistent doses of movement matter more than the occasional intense effort. And the last habit on this list is the quietest one, the one that hides most easily in plain sight. Most people over 50 are carrying more stress than they realize or acknowledge. Not the sharp, obvious kind that announces itself, the low-grade kind, the background hum of worry, responsibility, and pressure that never fully lifts. Financial concerns, health worries, the weight of caring for others, the general uncertainty that seems to grow as the years pass. And that chronic, quiet stress, sustained over months and years, physically damages the brain's memory center, not metaphorically, literally. The stress hormones that flood the body under ongoing pressure are corrosive to brain tissue over time in ways that show up clearly on imaging. Managing stress isn't about eliminating it. That's not realistic, and it's not the goal. It's about giving your nervous system regular windows to genuinely come down. Time outside, even briefly, a few minutes of real stillness, something that makes you laugh, something that pulls you fully into the present moment, Whatever that is for you specifically, the habit of returning to it consistently, of treating it as non-negotiable rather than optional, is what protects the brain long term. Now, the thing I mentioned at the beginning, the one thing most people do during the day that makes every habit on this list harder to hold on to, it's chronic understimulation. Passive, low-engagement hours, scrolling without purpose, watching without attention, moving through the day on autopilot without anything that genuinely challenges the brain. The brain needs resistance the same way muscles do. Crossword puzzles, learning something unfamiliar, reading something that requires your full attention, even a conversation that asks something of you. These aren't luxuries, they are the daily exercise your brain runs on. Take them away, and every other good habit you build loses some of its power. Here's the truth about all 7 of these. None of them feels like a big deal in the moment. That's exactly the point.